What gives me hope? My generation gives me hope. The youth that I'm growing up with don't tolerate injustice or discrimination. They're open-minded to new things and celebrate differences. The people who volunteer to do phone banking and advocate for others to have easy access to voting also gives me hope. They volunteer their time informing others about voting that is happening in their own community that they may not even be aware of. On top of that, they give information on where to vote. I'm thankful people like this exist in my community. Because of them, my immigrant parents vote and are informed of things that are happening around them. Minorities and people with lack of resources are also making their vote count because there are people in my community who are making voting easier for others because for some others there are obstacles and barriers for them.
How do you feel about early voting or voting by mail? Why? I believe early voting or voting by mail are great choices for those who cannot attend a voting poll. I don't think it matters much just as long as people are making time to vote and getting their votes in. I have family members who cannot get to a voting poll because of several reasons, like having to take care of their kids, going to school, work, and other things. The option to vote early and to vote by mail has helped my family make time to vote despite their busy lives. I strongly feel that having choices when it comes to how people vote can dramatically change the way people feel about participating and voting.
Voting is the lifeblood of a democracy. While as a young person I often feel powerless, voting is a way for our voices to be heard. It doesn't always feel like each individual vote might matter, but you have an opportunity to create change and elect your local official or representatives. If you don't vote, someone else is making that decision for you. This is why it's even more important for the elders of a community to be involved in today's voting advocacy. Elders are leaders in a community, and when they vote, they set an example for younger generations. It sends a message that voting is important. Elections are going to make decisions that directly affect your life and communities. However, the bigger point is that when elders vote, they set a precedent for others. As older people in a community, they are more respected and their actions hold weight, so younger people vote and follow in their footsteps. If elders advocate for voting, it demonstrates that this is something that everyone should do.
What was something interesting that you learned from either the videos or the discussion that we had with Peter afterwards?
I asked him why it's important for us to vote. He told me something important, that voting matters because of who you choose. Like, let's say, for example, Trump or Joe Biden. It's pretty important to choose who you want to pick and like who do you think like will do better as president for the state. And yeah.
Would you vote if you could?
Me personally, I would vote just because I want to, like, let's say I have a president that I really like. I want him to be the president. I would vote. But if there's really not really any presidents that I really like, I wouldn't necessarily vote because I like neither of them. And maybe I'll just let the others vote and see the outcome.
What did you learn from the voting videos that we saw?
What I learned was when I was watching that pretty long video, I learned that, as what someone had said earlier, that colored people had it harder for them to vote, and that I feel like colored people shouldn't have as hard as white people, because white people, they obviously have it easier for them for voting. And I just feel that like colored people should have it as the same as white people when they vote.
When Peter from Eastside Freedom Library came over and showed us the voting videos, what was something that you learned?
So something that I learned about two things that I actually remembered. So one of them, just like other people said, colored minorities are like, they had it worse. Unlike the white people, because they have like privilege and all that stuff. And then the second thing is that also people who came back from jail, who came out of jail, they actually had it worse too, because not as worse as the colored people, but they're not gonna be able to vote, which is like kind of not fair, because what if they want to like change the world or whatever? It's not as fair as white people.
During spring, we watched a couple videos about voting and learned a couple things. One thing I learned was the rules and restrictions that were applied to a certain group of people, which makes them unable to vote. And those certain people are, majority of them are minorities or people of color. It was also that those who don't reside in their own, owned homes, those people can't vote because they don't have a place that they could call theirs, or they could permanently call theirs. And it also made me wonder if those rules would apply to me and restrict me from voting. The only rule right now I would have against me is that I'm under 18, so I can't vote. But once I turn 18, will there be other rules that will prevent me from voting? Because in the future, when I am able to vote, I do want to vote because I don't want to be that person who would complain about the results if I didn't take action. And if these rules do get lifted, will the rule of those who have committed crime also be able to vote? That is all I have to say.
Say your name again and spell it.
I am Adora, A-D-O-R-A.
Hello, my name is Moore. During the springtime, we talked about voting. Something that I found interesting was that voting is used in many other ways. For example, the school board. Lots of things happen during the school board. But I find that I don't like it just because voting doesn't really put me in the middle, but sometimes you just have to choose which side you have to be on. Questions that I have is do I really want to vote? And for me personally, I think my vote would not matter because it's electoral votes, and there's millions of people in this country.
Access to voting has certainly changed over the course of American history, with the grandfather clause and literacy tests for Black people following the Civil War. Although access and voting rights for people of color and women has certainly increased, voting is still in many ways restricted. In 2020, with the presidential election, around 69% of voters either voted early or did mail-in voting because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Although this was an accessible way to vote for many, people of color, people in poverty, and homeless people were not able to vote this way. And this is a clear example of modern voter suppression.
I do feel compelled to become more civilly involved because some people are scared to stand up for themselves, and they are scared to do things that might make the government mad. And so I am in a position where I can speak without fear, and I want to speak in protection of other voices. Having Kamala Harris as vice president makes me have hope that we will someday have a female president, and the people I see who act in the best interest of others, not just themselves, that gives me hope.